they on? I guess they're always on now. We don't have to turn them on, huh?
Good evening and welcome to the Planning Commission meeting for the City of Glendale of November 18, 2015. After handling some of our technical issues, we can go forward, I believe. May we have a roll call, please?
Planning Commissioners Landrigan.
Here.
Lee.
Here.
Manukian.
Here.
Chairperson Astorian.
Here. Ms. Stadler, a report regarding posting of agenda?
The agenda for this meeting was posted on Wednesday, November 9th, 2015, on the bulletin board outside City Hall and on the city's website.
Very good. We'll follow Ms. Landrigan in our Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. So, in regards to approval of minutes for the October 7th, I was absent, so I will not be able. Go ahead.
I have an amendment to it.
Sure.
The fact that Commissioner Yasayan announced his resignation is not included in the minutes, and it happened at that time. I don't know where it's appropriate, but it should be included in there.
Okay. So approval with the amended request. Is there a second for it?
Second.
You're set? And now let's approve the minutes for the other one, I believe, right?
That was already approved, only it wasn't signed, so.
It has already been signed? Oh.
Yes, it was not signed. It was approved September 16th.
So it just needs to be signed? Yeah.
Just needs to be signed, yeah.
So you don't want me to sign it right now in front of all these people, right? We can do it later on.
We can do it later on,
Okay,
yeah.
excellent. Very good. Are there any oral communications? I don't see anything for stuff that is not on the agenda. The only cards that I have is in reference to the case in front of us, at least the first case. So we will pass on to that one. There is no zoning appeals. And of course there is no planning commission items. There is no old business. Under new business, we are going to be covering the case that has to deal with 4000 Bouquet Street. And I believe it's a standard varying case number PVAR 1500289, Ridgeline or Blue Line Stream Exception case number PRBSE 1500291. Ms. Stadler, we'll go to you.
Yes, this is a request by the applicant to deviate from the 15-foot high limit for an accessory building, which is a garage, a 15-foot street front setback, a 10-foot interior setback, and an exception to Title 16 that limits the height of any buildings to 15 feet on lots with secondary ridgelines in conjunction with the construction of a new one-story single-family residence and detached two-car garage. So let me give you a quick overview of the site. I think it'll help understand why the applicant was requesting variances. So this is the property, and it's actually quite large, and the developable side of it is small. The major issue that the applicant has is a secondary ridgeline. So you have a secondary ridgeline across the majority of the site. The property itself has 32,000 square feet, and they're proposing to build only on a small portion of it, located right at the corner where it takes access from Bouquet Street. The property itself was part of a subdivision that occurred in 1961. And so the surrounding lots developed at that time, but this lot didn't. For a long time, there was a future street that was shown running through this, thinking there would be developed of this larger open space behind it. Sometime in the past, this larger lot became public open space. I believe it was part of the San Rafael development, but it did become open space. So Bouquet never was extended. Earlier this year, the City Council rescinded the future street offer in this area. Therefore, all of this became a private lot. Another thing that happened recently is part of the permit streamlining. We used to have a frontage requirement. We no longer do. So this is an existing lot, and now we don't need to worry about the frontage because this already has existing frontage on a public street. So that's how it came to be a developable lot. The reason you're involved with this, there is a secondary ridgeline on the site. the applicant, we worked with the applicant to pull his development away from it. So he is not touching the secondary ridgeline. But since it is on the property, there's a requirement that it come before you for a secondary, a ridgeline permit, essentially. But again, he's not touching it. Development in a secondary ridgeline is prohibited, and so he is maintaining a setback from that. The other issue we have is he's actually asking for 2 variances. The first one is relating to the front of the street front setback. Right now in an R1R zone, the required setback is 15 feet. He's proposing to have, I believe, a 9.5 feet setback. When you look at the picture, and I wanted to point out too, the 9.5 feet actually is from the end of the right-of-way. So you can see the right-of-way itself, when you see where the sidewalk ends, the right-of-way goes on about another 9 feet from there, 8.67. So the setback is actually in addition to that 8.67. So it's well beyond 15 feet. So when you look at this and you think, oh, he's building right here, it's actually not true, because you look at the end of the setback, realize that the right-of-way does go about 8.5, 9 feet beyond that, and then the setback is taken from that point. So actually this property will have a greater setback than the other properties that are developed in this neighborhood. We do have homes that are also along Bouquet, although I think they have driveways on it, but their addressing is actually off Thurleen. This would be the only property in this area that would have frontage on Bouquet. Then you have a reduced front setback here. Instead of 15 feet, it would be 9.5. The applicant is also requesting from the property line a 5-foot rear setback. Again, this is all open space. This is SR zone, will never be developed. There are no homes in this area. You also have the way the topography works. You have a ridgeline coming down, then you have a little bit of a valley kind of in this area. And you can sort of see that pretty well on this picture. You can see the secondary ridgeline up here that's being protected. You see the flatter area where the applicant is proposing to develop. And you can see down here where it goes into a valley. You look at the site plan, this valley area, this is where he's proposing, the applicant is proposing his accessory building. He's proposing to build a garage here. And this is the building that is over height. And the reason it's over height is the way we calculate height. Look, this is actually, there's a cross section that shows the garage. And here you can see the back of the garage. That would be in this portion right here, where it goes downhill. This portion, it's 23 feet from the bottom, the exposed, the exposed wall to the top of the roof. But the actual floor, where you'll actually have your car parking, is here. It's at the 1196. This would be the elevation. Again, it goes back in this corner. This is the reason you're looking at a height variance, although from looking at it straight on from the street, it's going to look like it's 12 feet tall. The majority of this residence in here is also 12 feet tall. I can go up to 15, so it kind of varies. But you're looking at a difference of the higher area of the property would be 1,200, and then you have a small steps going down 3 feet, and then you have another living level of the house, and then down another foot, and you have your garage. So essentially, this is a flat lot that he's creating for his development. He's creating a flatter pad, one-level house. But again, we felt that the applicant was...
Is it the west wall that is going to be 23 feet? Is that what it is on the garage?
It's the lower part of the garage. I believe it's actually this wall, right down here.
Okay.
But you have a neighboring pad here. This neighboring pad here, I believe, is 1207. So this is quite a bit below. 1207 up here, this is the neighboring pad, and then you have the garage below. You put a 12-foot garage. That would be above what this pad level is. The neighbor might see a foot or two of garage from his, that would be even with his pad of his backyard. Not his house, but the pad of his backyard. The rest of this is this home is pretty much tucked in into this hill behind here. When you're looking at the plans, this retaining wall here is actually part of the wall of the house. He's building into the hill. So it's a requirement that he have I want to call it an impact wall, deflection wall, and then he has a requirement for 15 feet, and then he has another wall. So these are required walls for building code in order to make a house work on this site. And again, he's building into the slope here also. When you look at his grading plan is quite minimal, 700 cubic yards of grading balanced on site. So this property is exempt from the California Environmental Quality Act, so we've not created, because it's minimal, it's minor alteration to land. And there is no requirement for CUP for the grading, he's below the threshold. When you look at the development itself, I realized we asked him to turn in a rendering. Really, the design of the house falls under the purview of the Design Review Board, but he is showing that he can absolutely develop a house that falls within the height limits that's required under the code. However, one of the other exceptions that he's requesting from you are the requirements under Title 16 for hillside development require a pitched roof. He's doing a flat roof in here to maintain the height. So that is an exception that he is requesting from you. So not only is he requesting to have the garage be a little taller than normal, again, the view of the garage, the height of the garage won't be visible from the street. The additional height is something that would be below the level of the street that you would see in this view. But if continued it down, the garage would be down here. And so what you do see here is, though, you do see a deflection wall or the impact wall that would be above the roof of the house, and then you see the required setback for building and safety. And then up here is where the ridge line starts. And that's what you're looking at here. Here's where the ridge line would start. So in terms of making the findings, when the applicant first came in, he looked at setting back the full 15 feet. He wanted to have a 2-story house and tuck under the garage. And we told him no, he couldn't do that. Because it's a ridgeline, we feel a ridgeline is important to preserve. That is what council made that very clear. There's no development at all permitted in a secondary ridgeline. They told him stay off the ridgeline. So then how does he build a house that fits into the neighborhood? How does he have use of his property that was created in the 1960s? How does he have use with that? Create a house that's compatible and stay off the ridgeline? And how does he minimize the number of variances? In this case, he couldn't do anything about the slope that goes down here for his garage. But we felt it was better to have a garage that was separated rather than to have a higher building in this area. The way our zoning code works is if you attach the garage, you look at the low end to the high, then you would have, instead of a 23-foot accessory structure, under our code, you would have a 23-foot house. So we told him to separate it. The garage, under our R1R standards, he can have a detached garage at a 0 property line. He's actually showing a little bit additional setback in this area. His hardship, there are clearly constraints on this site. We did talk to our oak tree consultant. She said no way did she want him building in this area because it would endanger the trees, and there are also homes in this area, so we said no, stay out of this area, leave this alone, pushing him this direction. He's got a slope here, pushing him this direction. He has a slope in here, he tucked right into it, and here's where you have the height impact because there really has no option when he has a valley. But we felt that was the least impactful way to develop the site and still have full use. One of the options also you considered was for a variance, not having a garage at all. What if I just have a house, no garage? We thought, just to have a reasonable use like all the other neighbors in the area, it's reasonable to have a garage. So that's why we are supportive of the idea and the variance of having, or in this case, it's really not a variance for that height, it's a finding of exception to our Title 16 code that requires all accessory structures or all structures to be 15 feet or less. We felt that was reasonable because of the use, having a 2-car garage. The house itself, it meets the standards except for the setback. When we took a look at this, we said, well, most people think the setback starts from here, but he has an issue with legally. This setback doesn't start till somewhere 8.5 feet back here. And we did keep him 9.5 feet, but any further than that, we agreed with the applicant that would really impinge his ability to have a useful home, a usable home. So we were okay with a reduction of a setback there, and we felt, okay, there's a hardship there, and there is a reason to have that, to create a house that's actually usable. And let me go through the rest of the, sit down and go through the rest of the findings.
Please.
Let's see what I missed. That the strict application of the provisions of any such ordinance result in practical difficulties or unnecessary hardship inconsistent with the general purposes and intent of the ordinance. Well, the intent of the zoning ordinance is to allow development on sites zoned for residential uses where appropriate. We feel there is a flat area here, can be used as a single-family home. We feel that the applicant has come in with a design that allows for use of the property without impacting the neighbors. Although it isn't strictly in keeping with the setbacks of the ordinance, we feel the intent has been met here because of the other constraints on the site. We feel he's addressed them. So that would address practical difficulties and the unnecessary hardship. There are exceptional circumstances or conditions applicable to the property involved or to the intended use or development of the property that do not apply generally to other properties in the same zone or neighborhood. In this case, this has a secondary ridgeline and it has protected oak trees. The applicant is addressing both of those. We also have only one house at the terminus of this street. So in terms of setbacks, where you want to make sure you have some sort of uniformity along a street front, there are no other homes on this street that would align with this house that would be impacted by having a variance in the street front setback. In terms of the street, the interior setback, we have open space to the rear and no homes. So we're not concerned with that. In terms of being, well, it's not a zoning finding, but in terms of the height for the exception, again, we feel it's consistent because the height is only not for the house, but it's for a garage that adds to the function of this property. In terms of the pitched roof, the same thing. The applicant has tried to minimize the height and be as consistent with the hillside design guidelines, or the hillside design guidelines that are incorporated in Title 16. We feel he's met that here by having a flat roof, although a pitched roof is one that would require additional height to actually be absolutely consistent. We felt he met the intent of the code, even not the letter of it. Finding C, the granting of this variance will not be materially detrimental to the public welfare or injurious to the property or improvements in such zone or neighborhood in which the property is located. Again, single-family house in a single-family neighborhood. This is a single-story house throughout this neighborhood. There are 1- and 2-story homes. From the street, this will appear like a single-story home, 15 feet. So we feel that the granting of the variance would not be materially detrimental. And also in terms of the setback, although the street front setback is based upon the right-of-way in this case, there's additional right-of-way that's not visible from the photo. You can see it's actually set back even further than it appears on the photo. And if we set back any further and have them comply with the setback, then you wouldn't have a useful living area. In terms of the rear setback, again, we felt if they took the rear setback, losing 5 feet along the rear portion, it would pinch the living area and make it quite small for a single-level house. And then finding D, the granting of the variance will not be contrary to the objectives of this ordinance. We feel that this house has been cited appropriately for the project. The applicant has tried, I think it's evident that the applicant has tried to comply with the intent of the hillside ordinance. He's tried to minimize the height. He's tried to minimize the grading. Yes, he does have some setbacks, but the setbacks he has requested are ones that would not impact neighboring properties as the code intended. So the code really provides setbacks from neighboring uses when you have uses next to you. He really has no neighboring uses on interior setback to the rear because it's all zoned SR. That concludes my presentation. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Any questions for Ms. Stadler?
One question that I had, it was in the report, and then in one of the letters that I read, and this specifically relates to the garage and its 23-foot back wall. And just to clarify for myself, I describe it as we are building down rather than up, because in order to
Yes.
provide a flat foundation and basically floor. Now,
Exactly.
there's a comment. There was a suggestion that perhaps 2 retaining walls could be built in such a way that would ultimately reduce the massing of a 23-foot basic structure from the back of the house. I'm assuming from that angle. Why was that not pursued?
We wanted to minimize grading in that area. The retaining walls would only be facing an open space. We felt it was better to minimize landform alteration and not have it, but the applicant may also have other reasons.
So I guess you'll ask that from the applicant when
Sure.
time comes. Any other questions from Ms. Dalton for this time? None. So let's start this thing with the applicant giving us what he needs to do. Mr. Hagobian?
Good evening, Mr.
Stutler,
Chair.
how much time? I'm sorry, pardon me, sir.
15 minutes?
15 minutes, sir. Thank you.
We can figure out how to get this to work.
Okay.
It's not working.
It's not, I don't believe it's working. They did some work in here, and I don't believe this is functioning right now.
The timer?
Oh, it is.
I mean, we all have cell
we're good.
phones with timers.
I
So.
was
that.
thinking the same thing.
Is it done?
Yeah, it's working now.
All right, sir. We're all yours.
Good evening, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. My name is Edward Hagobian. I'm the architect of this project and the applicant of this variances. And if necessary for the records, my address is 220 South Kenwood Street, Suite 210, Glendale 91205. I think I would like to appreciate the presentation that Laura Stutler had, because I believe she covered a lot of things, not leaving much for me to talk, except that 2 issues that came to my mind. One is that recently I had 2 projects with Design Review Board that they were flat roof, 2-story, and in hillside, and both were approved. And both were kind of contemporary style. Somehow looks like the taste of the design board for hillsides are changed, and the flat roof looks like is acceptable. The other thing is that because of the shape of this plan of this house, as you can see, it's very long. In order to connect from one end to the other end, in fact, we have like about 300 to 400 square foot or more corridors and dead spaces. Otherwise, if we deducted that kind of corridors from the total square footage will come down like 300 to 400 square foot. Now, do I have to go through these findings, or you already covered that?
It's up to the commission.
It's actually up to you. I mean, you're making a case, so
Yes.
the information you think is valuable for us, give it to us.
I think it will be a repetition of what she said. As you can see, we have hardships, all kinds of hardships. The ridge line, the shape of the lot, there's such a big lot that is 30-some thousand square foot. That ridge line is in the middle, so the remaining of this lot is not usable, and even accessibility is an issue there. We cannot reach there. And what you see there with the retaining walls, these are requirements by the code of the building department. The lot is, as you can see, not only the depth is narrow, but also the shape is a kind of odd shape. If we had a rectangle shape, we could design a house that a corridor serves both sides of the rooms, so that the corridor will be much shorter, and the house will be, in square footage, will be the less with the same kind of rooms. Again, I'm asking if I have to go through these 4 findings, or you already covered that. Shall I start?
Okay.
Okay. So the first item is, how will the strict application of the provisions of any such ordinance noted above result in practical difficulties or unnecessary hardship related to the property, inconsistent with the general purpose and intent of the ordinance. Size of this property is more than 32,000 square foot. A large portion of this lot is not buildable because of the steep hill being divided into two pieces by secondary ridge line and its more restricted zoning code. The large portion of this lot is isolated by a secondary ridge line and is not accessible, and it will not be developed for any residential use. A small portion of this vacant lot in the front also consists of steep slopes, which limits the design of the house with existing zoning code. The triangular shape of the lot with sharp and tight angles also is another limitation. All above conditions results in practical difficulties to design and build a decent house with proper function, which is inconsistent with the intent of the ordinance. Without requesting some deviation from current zoning code, we cannot achieve the best results. B. What exceptional circumstances or conditions apply to the property involved or to the intent, use, or development of the property that do not apply generally to other property in the same zone or neighborhood? 1. This property is located at the termination of a bouquet street with no other property sharing the street for foot or car traffic. We are at the end of the street. There is no traffic there. All the neighboring properties, they are entering from the other street. 2. Size and rear of the property are hilly and are governmental properties of SR zone. There is no possibility to develop and use those lands to a residential zone use. There is no access to these properties from Bouquet Street. 3. Being zoned to secondary ridge line is another exceptional circumstances to this vacant lot. For all above reasons, this is a unique property which does not apply to other properties in that zone. C. Why will granting of the variance not be detrimental to the public welfare? The front of the property is facing a dead-end street with no other neighbor to use it to enter the house by foot or enter the garage by car. Therefore, the front of the house with less front setback than required by the code does not overpower the street. Being only one-story house is another factor to reduce the effect of the house to have less front setback. Front of the house will be visible for public from below street, which is more than 200 feet distant. Reduced resetback of the house does not interfere with any residential property, therefore does not encroach into any privacy of a neighbor. 3. Excessive height of the garage and retaining walls supporting the driveway are not visible to public. They are facing the interior of the property. Excessive height of the garage is not in direction of the ridge line but is towards the downhill. For all above reasons, granting of the variance will not be detrimental to public welfare. D. Why will granting of the variance to be keeping with the objectives of the ordinance? Objectives of the ordinance is to mitigate the design of a house to meet the standards of the code and use of a property with regards to its unique conditions without violating its intent and objectives. The applicant believes granting of the variance will be in keeping with the intent and objectives of the ordinance. Now, I would like to understand the question that Mr. Manoukian had for the retaining walls. In what location you think we should have a retaining wall?
Are you done with your presentation, Mr. Okoye?
I think so, yes.
Okay. With that, then, hang on a second. Let's find out if there are any questions for you from...
Sure, yeah. The question was this. we're building a garage whose back wall is 23 feet high, right?
Yes.
So, and that is being done in order to provide the structure that you need to provide you with a floor within the structure. So the question is, why can't we build retaining walls such that we can have ultimately a greater amount of breaking or not having the massing that you have right
May
now?
I ask if you can show me the location of that return? May I approach the?
Sure. Please do.
The garage is going to be here, right?
I mean, it's better to look in the plans where the garage is. The garage is here.
Here, and this wall is 23 feet.
This wall is almost 0 here and 23 high here.
Right.
So, first of all, retaining walls are allowed only to be 3 feet high. We have 2 setbacks in hillside. First 5 feet and second 5 feet.
Okay.
On the first 5 feet, the height of a retaining wall cannot be more than 3 feet. On the second 5 feet, height of the retaining wall can be not more than 5 feet. As you can see here, our distance from the property line is only maybe 3 to 4 feet. If you mean to put the retaining wall on the back side of it, it's not going to help this portion of the wall because it's 0 here. Gradually, it goes into the dirt. Yes, we can have a wall here, but that wall will come closer than 5 feet for the critical location of the height. So we have to stop at 5 feet, and the maximum height of the second 5 feet distance from the property line is only 5 feet high retaining wall. So 3 feet high retaining wall in 5 feet, first 5 feet setback,
And then another
5 feet on the second 5 feet.
Right.
Yeah.
So you could have a retaining wall, but it wouldn't do any good because
Exactly.
what you call the critical point is the highest point of your wall, which is 23 feet.
Yes.
Which you can't be because you would be too close to the property line.
I'm wondering if where is the garage?
Here it is. The section is down here.
We have both his and
No, this is the
engineer's
engineer's drawing. We had architectural
at
drawings
the top,
somewhere.
right there.
No, this is not the one.
Over here, Mr. Hakopian, it's on A2 right here.
Is that it?
Yeah, that's the garage.
Okay, here is the section of the garage, yes. This is the garage. And that extra is this leg of the building that goes lower.
That's what I meant when I said
Yeah.
you're building down.
Yes, otherwise the height of the garage could have been not more than 12 feet.
Okay. Any other questions for
I have one
Mr.
question.
Hakopian? Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm looking at the drain of the property. I'm trying to figure this out. Where's it draining down to? It's to the valley?
I think the engineer is here. Can you answer the questions regarding the drainage? Drainage.
Yeah, we'll relocate.
Up
At
here.
the podium. Please, please.
Georgian Tablian, I'm Happen, also I'm the owner. Right, regarding the drainage, there's an existing some drainage system. We're gonna relocate it, align it per the Department of Public Works, City of Glendale mandate and requirement. So we're gonna restore everything, building a basin, convey the flow, eliminate that CMP pipe. They have an 24-inch half pipe. It going and convey the flow and shoot it down the cliff through the vertical CMP drop. So what we have to do is just convey all the flow, build a basin, and then intercept the flow. And the requirement is we need to build a special driveway, channelized section, and then we'll take the flow into that vertical drop and take it down without disturbing the nature. And also we're not going to get into the open space, everything within the driveway area. So people, when they walk up, drive into the street, you're going to see nice pavement, nice landscape per the architect plans. And then amount of the flow, we just have not that much flow. That's maybe about 7 or 8 CFS maximum. The 24-inch culvert style. It's in case there will be maintenance, and then we could open the top. It will be all paved, and we'll eliminate anything. And the CMP also, we're gonna remove it and dispose it, and then we're gonna present something with the city of Glendale, whatever the required for the public work, and then we'll cooperate with them.
Obviously, that's not part of this plan drawing here, because I don't see anything that what you're telling me here.
It's the plan. We show that exactly on the drainage map. It is on the plans already, the existing conditions. Yeah, let me show you that. I'll start with this one maybe right here. This is the existing systems right here. Now the street flow toward the south, and then they have a 2 curb gutter both sides. It goes to the end right here. There is a swell, the kind of concrete swell and dirt swell. And when it reaches the edge at this point, it will be turned back to 24-inch CMP pipe. And then what had happened, that's half arc, and then with the poor concrete around it in case, and then it take the flow all the way to an existing drop structure at this location. Then what will happen, then from there it goes to flow into that open space, the natural water course, and then take the flow into further that downhill. What we are going to do is just convey the flow at this location, and we'll take the flow through the basins at this point, another basin at this location, then take the flow into that culvert, and you don't see it. It should be underground, but it's openable from the top. Then I would take it to this, relocate this structure to this point, and get it back to the same pad, and without disturbing anything. Because most of the flow into this area is coming from this property around the curb, and then the flow coming up right there, there is a concrete swell, I think longitudinal gutter and intercept the flow. I don't have them. Further down, there's an intersection right here. There is a flow coming from Turing Road down. It goes to this point and it continues south
Down.
I think there was continue easterly, and there is possibility some flow may convey, but there is some high point right there. Then it prevent that flow going into it. The only thing we're concerned about the flow coming from this property address 1461 Turing Road, and then in case he's a slope, we're draining toward the street. And also we have the gentleman, the property 1459 Curlin Road. They may have some of the pool area, surface flow drain toward here, and then this will be more than enough. It's just, and we'll take the flow, and then we're not decreasing any capacity, anything. We're gonna run the hydrologic data based on new methodology, and then impose that flow, come up with the worst scenario 50-year frequency, and we make sure this structure will take a flow. And then maintenance-wise, I believe the public work, they said anything underground, you need to have a special offset, etc. If you consider it like an open channel, longitudinal flow, and a kind of like a portable cover, but then it should be a kind of a pattern cover, and then or a trench drain style. And we're shifting the flow from there, from this area right here, and we're pushing it there, and then take it down without disturbing anything in a downhill at all.
So you'll have a grate on it, a decorative grate on top of it?
We don't have to put the grate because there's, what will happen, the surface flow is coming from here. We're gonna go through the intake right here.
Which is
Curb drain,
existing.
parkway drain. We'll take the flow, then it goes under the driveway, and from that point all the way down there. Then you could drive the car, but then you could see that structure. You could, if in case we need to clean up, something bad happen, maybe if the hill collapse here with any dirt, if that goes toward the east direction, may flow toward the south, then we could open this and we'll clean it up. And that's...
May I ask you a question?
Yes.
The drainage from your roof, do you have, I saw your roof plan, it's pretty extensive. Where is that drainage going to? Into that same culvert?
Oh, the roof...
Your roof drainage?
Okay, roof drainage, we're gonna intercept it, treat it, and then when we bring it right here at this location, we'll have a place to convey the flow into it.
So it'll join that?
We treat it, then we connect it into that system.
Now, to add to that then, are you going to have to upgrade that pipe so it now
Oh yeah,
carries
this is
that?
our over design, ma'am. This is we could convey 15 to 20 CFS, but we don't have that much flow from here. The main concern, anything from the ridge line right here to this point, and it have this ridge, this whole area, it added up to here, plus this property 100%. I'm assuming I'll intercept 100% with it, and this pipe will be able to convey the outlet. So we're gonna determine hydraulically prove. The other issue, there's flow coming from this wall right there, protective wall. We're gonna convey that flow, route it up, and then take it all the way down, then the collective point, and then put it back into the system. Right here.
Is that going to be a swale?
Yeah.
Is that going to be a swale there?
Then anything coming from the second ridge down, we will intercept it. Anything coming from the second ridge, this side will convey the flow. There is a gravity flow which leave there. There is some drainage system further up. It's on top of the ridge. This ridge is extend maybe further down right here. Oh, this point right here, flatted area, then this whole flow goes up. Drain, there is a longitudinal gutter, the swell, when they develop the area, intercept the flow, it goes about 5-6 property away from my property, right? Let's say I have about 5 houses almost right here, and then 1 house right here. So this gutter from the top would go all the way up to the last property. We have a swell is going up the top, and another one along this property further down. But then there's a 2 oak tree. I could see the oak trees right here.
Right there.
Well, we are not in that area. Everything the way it is natural. But there is some area here, convey that flow coming from the top. It's run parallel for every single property along the street. It will take that flow, and then it goes up towards south, the east direction. Then that's what will happen to convey the flow. And we want to make sure we always clean them up every year, Peter. Treat it, and then everything fine right there. There's half of the ridge right here, the secondary ridge, belong for, I think, the city of Glendale or somebody else. We have the half of this ours, because this property looks like a kayak. It's way away.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Few more things I have to add.
Sure, please go ahead.
Okay. A floor area ratio, lot coverage, ungraded area, cut and fill, landscaping, and all other standards of the code will be above minimum required and less than maximum allowed. For example, our floor area ratio is 2.74. 30% is allowed. Lot coverage is something like about 3 point something, while 40% is allowed. So we are not asking for any kind of variance for floor area ratio, lot coverage, landscaping area, ungraded area, and that's will be all I can say. Any questions?
Any questions from Mr. Huckabee? None, thank you. You may be seated. Thank you. Okay, so let's go on to folks that have filled out a card that want to have their opinions heard on this case. We will start with Lena Davidian Corbet.
I think it's
Corbett.
not working.
Yeah, we're having trouble getting this to work. It's sporadic, so we'll just
Do you
have to
have a phone?
No.
Here, I'll do it. That's all right.
Sorry.
Ms. Corbett.
Yes, I wanted to read a letter on behalf of my father who lives on my parents who live on 1451 Bellow Road. But before I start, I wanted to take issue with two things. One with Laura's description of the setback. I grew up on 1451 Bellow, and I've ridden my bike probably hundreds of times around in that area. And yes, the sidewalk ends, but there is more asphalt, and to call that a setback, I think would be a mischaracterization. It's the street. The street goes a little further than the sidewalk. I wouldn't call that a setback for the house. Another issue that I had, and that was the applicant's characterization of the street. And he was talking about how really this is the only house on this street. Well, that's not true either, and none of these pictures show that there's two houses right next door. And this house is going to be right behind two houses. And I'm not sure if the neighbors are here from those two houses, but I think that's a really gross mischaracterization to say that there's no houses on the street. Surely their driveways don't enter that way, but those houses are there, and unfortunately you don't see it on any of these pictures. So I'll get to the letter. My name is Hirabet Davidian, and my wife and I have been the homeowners at 1451 Bellow Road for over 35 years. What initially drew us to buying a home on Bellow Road is the beautiful mountain-like setting amid the modest single-family homes in the area. As we watched other parts of Glendale succumb to McMansionization that has become so prevalent, we took solace to the fact that our neighborhood had remained immune to that kind of change. The ridge lines that this proposed new construction would impact can be clearly seen from our backyard. When my granddaughters play in our backyard, they often observe a family of deer on the mountain ridgeline along the mature pine trees. To see the natural beauty of this tree-lined ridgeline replaced by a new construction that would sorely stick out within this neighborhood of modest houses built in the 1960s would be a terrible loss. While the hearing today is limited to the code variances, I speak for several of my fellow neighbors when I say that we all oppose this new construction and we all vow to use our best efforts to make sure it never comes to fruition. We don't need another example of a Glendale neighborhood destroyed by an incongruous visual blight. With respect to the proposal on hand, I take issue with several aspects of the Planning Commission staff report. On page 3, the report states that the proposed size of the home is comparable to many homes within the same area. This is patently false. To the left of the lot is 1461 Thurleen Road, which is 1,810 square feet. To the right is 1459 Thurleen Road, which is 2,100 square feet. I can speak from my parents' house, which is less than 2,100 square feet. Almost all houses in this neighborhood are in the range of 2,000 square feet. Clearly, that is a significant difference to the 2,700 square foot house the applicant wants to build. Why not use the extra footage to comply with the city setback requirement? Why is the Planning Commission bending over backwards to accommodate the applicant by saying such things as, I quote, the strict application of the zoning code would place the property owner at an unfair disadvantage? When the applicant knew full well what the city's requirements were before purchasing the property, who gets to purchase an odd-sized lot and then seek preferential treatment after the fact? These are not new requirements, and the property investor, in this case, would, of course, have to have been aware of the hillside ordinance restrictions before purchasing the lot. Additionally, the report fails to meet the very section of the municipal code it cites on page 3. Chapter 30.11.040, subsection AB of the code states, in connection with the hillside development review policy, that a development shall be compatible with the surrounding neighborhood in terms of size, scale, bulk mass, roof line orientation, setbacks, and site layout. Why does the report only address the size aspect of the code chapter and not the setback? I also take issue with the report's assertion that this lot doesn't necessarily have to meet the city's front setback requirement because of its unique location at the end of the street, and that front setback requirements are really only meant for houses that are aligned next to each other. Really, is this the precedent we want to set? One of the charms and unifying features of the home in this area are their deep setbacks, which are larger than what the current code calls for. That makes the setback requirement for the proposed new home all the more crucial, as the new construction promises to be an eyesore that will disrupt the harmony created by the original housing plan. Nowhere in this report do we see analysis of how this development complies with Chapter 30.11.40, Subpart AD of the Code, site plans for development of property on steep slopes shall take into account the visual impact on surrounding properties. Undoubtedly, this is the fundamental issue with this project and which deserves the most discussion. How can we all, with a straight face, agree that a new, large construction among modest mid-century homes with very little setback and a 23-foot-high garage doesn't have a negative visual impact on the surrounding properties, as well as Camino San Rafael Street behind it?
So, Ms. Corbett, do you have a little bit longer to go, or?
As you can see from my letter, I'm almost done. Can you all, as commissioners sitting on this panel, say that this proposed development meets the spirit of the city's municipal code, the code that you all took an oath to protect? Last but not least is the environmental impact of constructing a home in this particular wilderness location. The proposed lot on Bouquet Street serves as a wildlife corridor for deer that make their way from Bellow Road and travel down Bouquet to feed on the pine cones from the native coniferous trees en route to the hillside heading south. And you will see from the report, too, that they are cutting down pine trees for this lot. Concern for wildlife is no doubt one of the reasons the city decided not to build on this particular location when the area was originally developed. I've attached here city records from 1961 showing their intent was never to approve more than 26 lots. As such, the report's finding that this project qualifies for a Class 3 exemption pursuant to the California Environmental Quality Act is problematic at best. The exemption applies only prima facie, for if there was even a minimal level of analysis conducted, it would be evident that this project will have a significant effect on the surrounding environment due to unusual circumstances, which is an exception to a Class 3 exemption. I implore the Commission to not rubber stamp a project that can have a significant detrimental impact to an otherwise great part of our city. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Randy Wood. Five minutes, right?
Okay. My name's Randy Wood. I live in the canyon since 1989 on Edmonton Road, close to the golf course. That's gotten real quiet lately. I just want to voice my concern about these developments in the canyon. I've seen a lot happen over the years, and a lot of it is not good. There's always variances. Why are there variances? If we're having a hillside ordinance, why are there so many variances? If you have a vacant lot and you can't build a house to the codes, then I guess you shouldn't be building a house on the vacant lot and leave it open to wildlife and for open space for everyone to enjoy. It just boggles my mind. I see these houses being put on these hillsides, that how are they going to put this house? And somehow they get it in there, but it takes forever. These projects go on and on and on. So I'm here just as a concerned neighbor to voice my opposition to the project. That's why are we always doing variances? If you can't do it to the code, then maybe you shouldn't be building a house there. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Bill Nickel?
Want me to be last?
No, I just go by order. So.
Well, it was almost the last one. And anyway, I'll go ahead and proceed.
You can never be the last. So.
My comments will just be in the wrong tense. I'm Bill Nickel, Director of the Chevy Chase Estates Association, Mr. Chairman, and members of the Commission. And you've heard the comments, or you will hear the comments forthcoming from many of the neighbors, and many valid comments. You've also received some very interesting mailings from Mr. Fuhr and others, in which many of the details, which I shall not repeat because they've not been spoken yet, many of those details will provide you the information that you need to accomplish what we wish you would do. And as you've seen and heard these presentations, we believe there's sufficient evidence and concern among the neighbors surrounding this application that it should be denied as presented. The guidelines are quite clear, and we acknowledge that there is room for consideration in special circumstances. The project, however, presents some unique and significant problems that are documented in the various communications to you and must be acknowledged. We at the Chevy Chase Estates Association are strong supporters of property rights, which is the purpose of our very being for the last 78 years. We believe a property owner has the right to use his property as he sees fit. We also believe that those nearby who are affected by an owner's decisions have rights. They have the right to protect their own properties and those properties' values from potentially negative influences. And for the many reasons that have been presented and will be forthcoming this evening, I would respectfully request that this application as presented be denied. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Wendy Holt?
Hello, thank you for the time to speak. There's questions that I have and concerns that I have. Where the garage is being proposed, I walked that property today just to see kind of what's going on. And there is a drainage that was built by the property above that's next to it, the 1461. They built something that is a concrete to handle the drainage there. So what happens with that? Because they obviously had some difficulties and built something to handle that problem. So would this then cause more difficulty? I also heard the gentleman say that sometime that anything that couldn't be handled with that would be diverted to the street. Thurleen is an extremely steep street, and we already, when we have rains, which is infrequent, but if this is an El Nino year, and actually what's going to happen, which we had about 9 years ago when we had the big rains, we had about 60 inches up there, it is a waterfall, significant waterfall. And there's about 27 properties down the downward slope of that would have to then take on more of that. So that's dangerous for the people, anybody that parks on the street. Trash day, all of the trash bins go flying down. We just cannot afford to have any more diversion of any liquid down that street. I don't know if you've looked at it, but it's a very steep street. And then the other thing is that on the ridgeline, asking for the variance on there, if there's not a proposal, first, it's not allowed to build on, and secondly, they're not proposing to build on it, why have the exemption? So that's my question. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Appreciate it. And the last speaker is Julia Wood.
Hi, good evening. Actually, some of the things that I wanted to address have already been addressed. One of the main issues I had was the drainage, which the engineer and Wendy just addressed, but I still cannot visualize it. I don't understand all the technicalities that you probably understand, but I'm very familiar with that area, and I just cannot visualize it. Particularly, Wendy said that they already have drainage there. The neighbor over here, who I am amazed is not here. They're going to be sitting right on top of that garage as well. It's just baffling to me. The other thing that I want to say is that the people on the other side, who are also not represented here tonight, are apparently renters. So the people who are occupying the house and who got the notice about this whole thing are renters. So the owners of that property are not here tonight either. Another thing I wanted to say, I just have to echo what Randy Wood said. The thing about the variances, I have to admit, I live in the canyon. I've been there for 24 years. And I just really do not understand how, with every development that comes down the pike, we are talking about variances. And I have to just ask, and I mean, I'm a layman, so, you speak English or, tell me, educate us why some, allowances have to be made for the few to the detriment of the many. Along the same lines, we're talking about the setback of that house. When you're talking about, like, where am I? Maybe 10, 12 feet away from you, sir? And I'm thinking, okay, so the house is going to be right there. Where's the room going to be for the beautification? Where's the room for the landscaping? Where's the room for making that look like it's going to fit beautifully into this neighborhood? that picture up there behind you does not really do justice to what you're looking at. It would be nice if you could see it. If you haven't seen it personally, it would be really nice if you could see it personally. There's not much flat land there, so they're basically going to have to just bulldoze it on down. And anyway, I just wanted to say that. And then another question I had was this Lot 27. I just am wondering why, after I know one of my neighbors here has been living here for 45 years, and the lot we've never knew that the lot was ever even going to be for sale. So my question is, I purchased this home thinking that all of these beautiful hillsides behind me is never going to be developed. And then, lo and behold, there's Lot 27. So again, I'm a layman. I just want to be educated. How many more of these lots are there in the city of Glendale and in these beautiful hillsides that keep getting attacked? But how many more surprises are out there? And how can we as the public educate ourselves so we can find out about these easements and how the city is relinquishing, parts of streets and saying, okay, we're going to extend this street just a little bit more. And, the rest of us, the public, isn't really aware of, what you're doing. I think if more people were aware of this, they would be more up in arms about it. So that's my main question would be is when was the lot sold? Who sold it? Who got the money for the lot? And how many more of these lots are out there? And if you're not the right people to ask, how can we make it easy for the public to find out so that we're not blindsided by stuff like this and then have to come here on a Wednesday night in our busy lives and try and fight City Hall, which in my experience hasn't really been too fruitful or successful. It's not a very easy process, as you know. And thankfully, people like Lena and Roland Fuhrer take the time to do their research and look at the ordinances and the codes and everything else. But I just asked myself, the codes are there for a reason. The ordinances are there for a reason. The standards are there for a reason. So why are we always having to do battle to say, why are you making these allowances for these people? And again, the other thing I wanted to say is the usable dwelling. Somebody used that term, usable dwelling. 2,700 square feet. How many of you could use 2,700 square feet in your house? I don't know. Anyway, thank you for your time.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Mr. Akopian can respond hopefully to some of the issues that were raised.
Yes, you can.
Please go ahead, sir.
Yes. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 houses in that neighborhood that the square footage of those houses are following. 3005 Anita Drive, 2910, 2,910 square foot. 1436 Bellow, 2,940 square foot. 1460 Turlane Road, 3,360 square foot. 1446 Turlane Road, 2,714 square foot. 1424 Turlane Road, 3,090 square foot. 3010 Anita, 3272, 3,272 square foot. 1461 Bellow, 3,378 square foot. 1479 Bellow, 3,394 square foot house. That's one thing. The other thing is that this property was not purchased recently. This was purchased in 1998. That's 17 years ago. Now, if you look in the side setback of the existing houses, one more thing about the size of the houses. All those big lots with 30,000 or about 30,000 square foot, they have all these big houses. And this lot is 33,000 square foot. And our contribution to the city is a huge piece of this property that will remain natural. Codes and the reason. There is a reason also for a variance when a lot is like this one, which has limitations, all kinds of limitations. So we submit a variance to be able to build a house with some kind of deviation from the code that I don't believe that it hurts anybody. When this existing houses, if you look into the map that shows neighboring houses, their side setbacks are 5 feet, 4 feet, 6 feet. Our side setback to our, may I approach to show you?
Go ahead.
Don't have that plan that shows these neighbors that they have 5 feet side setback. This is, for us, this is a side setback. This is the front setback. We have 10 feet side setback here. So we are not encroaching into their privacy. There's a wall that, of course, it's apparently encroaching into our property, but not an issue. If the drainage is not in a good shape now, after it's engineered, you know that when we go to submit the plans for the city, we have to go through a very careful plan check by the engineering department to check all these issues, the drainage. If the drainage is not controlled now, after this house is built, if it's built, it will be controlled. It will be engineered. What is there now is not in a good shape. The lady asked about the landscaping. We have a landscaping in the front, right in the front. So it's not that this property will expose to the street with no landscaping. Right in the front, we have landscaping. That's all I can say, if you have any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Rokovian. Any questions for Mr. Rokovian?
No.
Go ahead, please.
Mr. Hakobian, right?
Mr. Hakobian.
Yeah, Mr. Hakobian. What did you, when you designed this dwelling here, initially you must have, tried to meet the 15-foot setback, front setback, and tried to design the house. And then you're coming back and saying that there's hardship with that. I want to be convinced by you. Why is there a hardship? I'm looking at this your dwelling design here. Why is this by having the 15-foot front setback, you are facing this difficulty with your design? I understand the 23, foot height on the garage. There's a even though it's a self-imposed hardship, there is hardship there with that design. But can you explain to me a little bit more detail?
Okay, we can cut it back to the 15 feet.
And then what will that end up being?
It will hurt us, but if that is the solution for this project, we'll cut it back to 15 feet. The way it functions now, it functions. We will suffer a little bit in the function in order to be able to build a house there.
Okay.
If this can be a subject of condition of approval, we'll cut it back and make it 15 feet. We have no other choice.
That it is right now, right?
Not gonna happen.
Well, yeah, that would take one of the variances off the table.
Yeah, because 5 feet setback is really towards the.
Well, we have to cut 6 foot
hillside,
back.
so, yeah.
By the way, that is just one corner that is that close. Of course, we have to cut from the other rooms also. But if we have to do it, if it's that bad, my thought was that the front of this house is a street, a dead-end street. This is not the kind of street that two sides of the street are face-to-face. There's nothing in face-to-face here. The next facing building is 200 feet distant from this place.
Mr. Jacobian-
That was my thought about designing the way it is.
Another question to you then is that you have a detached garage right now, and maybe at one point you might have considered having your garage. Maybe you might have to sacrifice one of the family rooms here, but into that lot. What was your difficulty with that?
I worked very hard on that. I tried to do it. It doesn't work. It really doesn't work.
Please?
Pardon?
Well, why doesn't it work?
Because it takes away a big portion of this house, a large portion of this house. And you know, a garage is 20 feet, and then the setback, according to the code, setback of the garage from front of the property has to be 18 feet, not 15 feet.
Right.
We don't have that kind of space here.
That's warranted here. Yeah.
Thank you. Any other questions?
May I make a comment in regards to what you said? I suspect that a variance for a 15-foot setback, in using the parlance, is cheaper than the variance for a 23-foot massing of the garage. That's my takeaway. Because the 15-foot setback in front of a garage, nobody's going to see it. It's not going to sit on anybody's vantage point. But that 23-foot wall that you have on that side of the property, I've read all of these letters and I'm listening to everything that I'm hearing. Universally, it is on people's minds. Because that will be like, they will get up, they will look up, and the thing that they see is this wall.
That wall is not visible from any place.
Well, that's not what these people are saying. Now, that may be the case after the fact, but this is what I've heard and I'm seeing here. So
that wall is facing, I would say, west, which there's nothing there.
Nobody sees that.
That's not true.
All right. Any other questions for Mr. Jacobian? You may be seated, sir. I have a question for Ms. Stadler.
Yes?
In one of these letters, I think it was Ms. Corbet's letter. Do you have that, the part that it's been highlighted?
You have it?
And it has to do with the subdivision.
Okay.
I think the reference is made, and the reason that I want you to comment on this thing is because there is a reference to this lot when it was subdivided, that it was not supposed to have been the lot, and the process in which it turned to be a buildable lot is what you just explained to it, and I don't want to gloss over it. I want for folks to know how it turned into a buildable lot, if what is being highlighted is the actual, in actuality is what has happened.
What happens when you have a track map is you have conditions of approval, which I know you're familiar with. Draft conditions of approval are created, and then you have a tentative track map. When a map comes in to be finalized, in this case, you had grading going on. There was some adjustment, apparently, to accommodate the grading. And then a map is recorded. If there's lots that have restrictions on it, as I gave you a copy of you have a copy of the recorded map. This is what was actually approved. If there's any restrictions on the use of a lot, it will be recorded on the face of the map itself, or it'll actually be, or on the frontage page, or it will be recorded on the face of the map itself. There are no restrictions. However, when this lot was created, there was absolutely, through the center of this lot, there was a easement taken, a future street taken. And that future street was on the books until earlier this year when the city rescinded it because they didn't have use. I think they're all on. Sorry. They had no use for the future street. It wasn't going anywhere because it goes into open space that's publicly owned. And so, in light of the fact that there are no restrictions on the lot, you have a graded lot that was graded under a code, and you have a lot that is also not zoned SR, but a lot that is owned zoned residential, just as the rest of this tract is, it is a suitable lot for residential purposes. It was a legal lot created through a subdivision map, and then we see no other restrictions. Also, when you have a tentative map, once you record that tentative map, all those conditions go away because the controlling document becomes the map itself, and the lot's created under that map. So what we follow is this map. Now, a lot of times what you're used to seeing on some of lots that are subdivided more recently is you might have restrictions that were, or conditions that were on a tentative map, and they carry over even after a map has been recorded. But those are conditions that would be mitigation measures that would have been included as part of the California Environmental Quality Act. That does run separately from the map, and you can have conditions that are, after a tentative map is recorded, that still run with the land. In this case, this was done in 1961. This was recorded years before the California Environmental Quality Act took effect. And so, therefore, once this was recorded, this is the controlling document. Unless there was something else that was recorded, which we have no evidence that anything else was recorded. We see nothing else. It's not in a title report. It's not on the face of this map. It's not on the title page. So in light of that, we go with our zoning code. And so that's why we feel that this is a residential lot. It's been zoned residentially since it was recorded. There is an SR zone right behind it. There are publicly owned lots behind it, and even on all sides of it to the rear of this property. It's zoned SR, and it's under public ownership. And hence, that's the reason why the city rescinded its offer to take a future street.
Because it was going to end up into public property, basically. Is that what you're saying?
There was no reason to have a street go forward because it wasn't going anywhere. Exactly. It's going into public open space. We weren't going to develop it. But this lot is different. This lot is private, a privately owned lot, zoned for residential uses, and that's what he's proposing. He's proposing a residential use, same as all the other lots that are developed as part of this tract. So I don't know if legal has any additional comments, but as far as we're concerned, we do have other lots. Somebody asked if there's other lots like this in the neighborhood. The answer is we don't track them. We don't track what lots are necessarily vacant. When somebody comes in and they propose to build, we take a look at the lot at that time. So in terms of does the city have a database of what lots could be constructed? No, we don't. So, I mean, other than the fact that we just know where we have properties in the city, and on a one-on-one basis, we can look something up and see if it's developed or not, but we don't have an overall plan that shows them.
But didn't we, maybe, and correct me if I'm wrong, didn't we at a point in time had a count of the vacant lots, especially in Chevy Chase Canyon or the Chevy Chase Canyon homeowners area? Didn't we do that once?
We did when we were looking at hillside development standards about, I forget how many years ago, I want to say 2001, 2004. At that time, we did create an open space map to look at what properties we felt were open space, and all we did was we did a study of what lots we had showed development on for tax assessor.
That was also substandard, I remember that.
Exactly, and that could perhaps be looked at as what lots are developable or not developable or available. But in terms of analyzing them to see if they were all legal lots, if they were part of a tract, we never did that level of detailed analysis.
Okay. Thank you. Go ahead.
Yeah, Ms. Stoller, I raised this design question to the architect, but I want to also raise this question to you. I know Mr. Redder Dong had looked at this. It's very challenging, narrow parcel here. And you mentioned during your presentation the only option that you thought this lot had was to have the detached garage. And he explained why that was the case because of the size of the garage and the setback requirement. And that's why it ended up where it did. Do you share the same opinion of that? Have you looked at some other options of locating that garage?
Yeah, we did look at other options for the garage, absolutely. We looked at what could we do if we included it as part of the house. There was suggestions of perhaps putting it underneath the house so we would not have it as a separate structure. However, when we looked at those options, it created other variances. So we were looking at a way that would minimize it. We felt the most important control was to have that ridgeline preserved and to have the trees preserved, the oak trees. And so we felt, well, the option that would have the least amount of impact, the least amount of landform alteration, that would have the best option of preserving the view of everybody around it, was to have a garage set aside, lower down to separate them. So you would have a detached garage in one section where it's essentially, I wouldn't say hidden, but it's not as obvious from the street. You can see it set to the side, and then you have the main flatter area of the site being used for the home. We felt that gave a good option. And so that was the one that the applicant, that was one of the proposals he came in with, and we said, yeah, that made a lot of sense to us. Yes, it is over height in one small portion. However, that small portion where it is over height does not face residential uses. It faces the open space behind it. So I suppose it might be visible from far above in the open space area, but directly adjacent homeowners, they won't see that. They won't see the back of that garage in that location.
So in other words, the 6 homes that are around this proposed development are not going to be able to visually be impacted by the back of the garage.
We don't feel that they will be. And when we looked at it, no.
Thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions? Are you ready to close the public hearing and start deliberating? All right, let's do so. Who wants to go first?
Well, I'll give my nickel's worth. Probably got where I'm heading with this, with the questions I asked, and I wanted to find out if there was real hardship with this case. I mean, this is very challenging hillside development, and wanted to make sure that that they adhere to the guidelines that was set forth as much as as best as they can. And one of the things that bothered me when I looked at the design was some like there was some not hardship, but there was some inconveniences that might have been caused with the setbacks. So that's why I posed that question. And obviously the owner developer is willing to have that 15-foot setback to alter their design to adhere to that. So then we got 2 remaining variances, which is the height variance, which I think we heard from our staff and then also from the applicant, the justification behind that, and also with the 5-foot setback on the rear of the lot, which faces the hill. With the modification of the front setback to 15 foot, and I think the project could be justified to allow the height variance and the rear setback variance.
Thank you, Commissioner Chang. Either Ms. Landigan or Mr. Agopian? Mr. Manukian?
I gotta express my surprise at the staff that, and maybe I'm wrong on this one, that given the fact that there was so much hesitation or pushback by the neighbors of this project, efforts were not made earlier on to possibly bring the 2 sides together. Or maybe it's not too late. Maybe we should continue this and have them do just that. So, because rarely do I see a hearing that begins with us being presented by a petition that contains, 40 homeowner signatures and a homeowners group showing up to oppose a project. I think it would have been constructive if there had been an informal meeting before the fact, such that really basic concerns that have been reflected in these letters would not have been stated. For instance, the 23-foot, the more I look at it, the more it becomes clear that the 23-foot height of the garage is in the far back and to the left of the property as I'm looking at it. But if you read these letters and some of the statements that are made, that is clearly not the understanding of the neighbors. And that's unfortunate. Although I got to say, I don't understand how it can be called a hardship in quotation marks, when someone goes and buys a property with their eyes wide open as to its setup and the way it looks and the possibilities that it provides us. To me, hardship is you're already there, your house is there, and you need to change something to make it more livable, more palatable, more valuable, whatever. And unless you're given a variance, you will have a hardship. This is not a hardship. This is, as one of the commissioners said, a matter of choice. And we keep giving variances until the exception takes over as the rule. And that's not something I like to think about. In any event, with that, I'm going to just listen to the rest of you commissioners and see, if you can help me make up my mind, so to speak.
Ms. Lanner?
Well, one of the things that I've always thought was helpful when we do any hillside development, especially one that's on such a substandard lot here, and is always helpful for the neighborhood to see, is to do a model. It's also helpful for the planning commissioners. I explained to Commissioner Manukian and unfortunately, Mr. Hakopian, you didn't do yourself any favor. You read the topo wrong, and you pointed it out wrongly. But the garage is practically level with the neighbor's pad. It's the top of the garage is flat, and then it drains downhill. So it goes a little bit down. So it's just a flat surface that is there. The back part drops 23 feet into that drainage area that everybody knows. So that's where the 23-foot wall is. By explaining that, I think it's clear to you all where it is. I don't think anybody has made that clear. A model would have made that clear. One of the issues that is many people have talked about here is how their vista is going to be impacted. From looking at the property and looking at this design, one home will have their hillside view changed. I am very sympathetic to how any property is developed in adjacency to other properties. I think it's an extremely important issue to me. I do believe, though, that we have the right, and I think Mr. Nichols said the same thing, to develop our property and to do it responsibly. I think that if we could continue this and have the architect come back with a model that would show you all the impacts, I think the neighborhood would be more receptive to this design. And I would encourage you, if you can, do that 15-foot, because I believe, after looking at this, and everybody says, why do we have variances? And variances are, first of all, they have to come to Planning Commission. It costs them a fortune. They have to go through more public hearings. And they are for situations that exist that are extraneous. And a ridgeline is extraneous. And us having a ridgeline ordinance is extraneous to normal development of a property. So that would be a reason to seek a variance. And to have a variance, they have to present findings and show us how that is compatible to the neighborhood. The drawings don't help convince you or my colleagues here at the moment. To me, I think that if we could see it in a model I think the neighborhood would be far more comfortable with this design because I think I would too. And I think we could make a determination and the applicant would be able to convince all of us that this fits in well. That is my suggestion because I think if we make a decision based upon what we know and what you don't know, I don't think that's fair to the neighborhood because I think in fairness to the neighborhood and to the applicant, I think we need to see this in a manner that is understandable to everybody. That would be my suggestion.
I agree.
It's not a requirement, but I think that it will serve us to serve the public intent and the private right at the same time.
With the modified 15-foot setback.
I would recommend that.
Right.
And so let me open the public hearing. It is open as we speak. And let me ask Mr. Gopian a question. Yes. So I can see from the nods that I'm getting, 2 to the right and 1 to the left, that that's the direction that this commission is going. I haven't made my thoughts apparent as of yet. Is that something that you can or you should work towards? Or would you, because without it, we can make the decision here right now. Would it be workable for you or to your advantage and to the neighbor's advantage, to the Chevy Chase Canyon homeowners, to see something tangible? Can you do that?
I can do 15-foot setback.
And can you do the model?
Well,
Not a
it's
SketchUp model.
Pardon me?
Not
a
a SketchUp model.
Okay, if that's costly, the owner has to agree
But that's
with
why
that.
I want to ask you.
If we have to, we have to.
But no, you don't have to, and that's why I'm seeking what your plans are. Whether would you like to do it or not?
How about computer 3D that you can see from different angles? It's not good.
No.
Then we have to, we'll make the model.
Very good. Do we make this if we are going to go ahead? Thank you, sir. You may maybe sit down.
If you want to continue, please give me enough time.
Yeah.
And what is enough
Well, models
time?
take a lot
2
of time.
months.
2 months.
2 months for a model.
Yeah.
Okay.
Maybe 3 months. Model is taking time.
It could be a massing model. You don't have to have all
Yeah,
the
that's what I
detail.
was going to say.
Well, this is a contemporary house, so it's just...
So that's not, this is not design review. We're not looking at that
Okay.
detail. We're looking at the
Right.
massing
Right.
and the
Okay.
site planning.
Okay.
Now, is it prudent or maybe smart for them to use this model to have a meeting, pre-meeting with the neighbors, before coming up here? Or?
I think that would be
So we always encourage that anyways.
encouraged.
If Chevy Chase Canyon Homeowners Association and the interested neighbors can get together with Mr. Agopian and go over it, and who knows, maybe the computer modeling that he has
Exactly.
in mind may just answer some of the questions that you have. And then for us to postpone this to a date certain, 90 days from now,
Would you want to make it the second meeting in February? I don't have a calendar for next year in front of me.
do you want to borrow mine?
I thought that was
Does
your
it go to
Bible.
2016?
It is.
It is.
By the way, 3D model is as costly as making...
Okay. But one is faster than the other. Or no?
3D model is good that you can show in a screen in a different angles from different points of view so everybody can see. It's your choice, whichever you want.
So, for example, the neighbor to the left or to the right can come out and you can actually turn it and you can show them
Yes.
what
If
the
you
view will be
include
from
them, if you include the neighbors in the model massing.
And that would be too expensive now.
Well, not in a computer one.
Not in the
But I mean, they're just
Even with
massing
the
models.
computer is extra.
Mr. Gobian, the idea here is very simple. For you to be able to get together with the neighbors, Mr. Antopian, and to be able to come up to a conclusion that serves both, all of you. And there is a very good possibility for that to happen, by the way. All right, what's the date, Ms.?
The date would be February 17th.
February 17th.
Right.
Thank you. Appreciate it. So I close the public hearing again. So I would like to hear a motion to continue
I'll make the motion.
to February 17th.
Okay.
I will second.
I'm just correcting, this is without further notice?
Without further
Further
notice.
notice.
Day certain February 17th with the 15-foot setback incorporated into your design and with the maximum model.
Without further notice. Okay. Roll call, please.
Planning Commissioners Landrigan,
Aye.
Lee,
Aye.
Manukian,
Aye.
Chairperson Astorian.
Yes. Thank you, folks, for coming. We always appreciate hearing from all of you. The next case in front of us, case number 2. Let me just wait a minute so the room clears.
Maybe can we call it a few-minute break?
Should we ask for a 5-minute recess, please? So we are in recess.
Thank you.
And those guys, I don't know, some of those things are not working.
Are these on automatically?
So welcome back to the Planning Commission meeting for November 18 after a short recess. We are going to go to our second case, Code Amendment Case Number PZC 1525985. And who other than Mr. Foy?
Thank you. This is concerns the state model water efficient landscape ordinance, which the city is required to adopt or to adopt something stricter than it. And this has been around for a number of years, but recently, in response to the historic drought, the governor directed the State Department of Water Resources to issue new regulations to put this in place. So the City Council will be adopting this, and we wanted to bring forth also a code amendment so that we could reference this in our chapter on landscape ordinance. Now, this model water ordinance is going to apply to only a limited set of projects, really. And there are many existing properties in Glendale that it will not apply to. So we do have to keep all of the existing regulations in our landscape ordinance as they are, and just put a reference that if you fall under the categories of projects to which it applies, then you have to follow that. So we're going to have, in a sense, some parallel standards going on. One for new development or the rehabilitation of very large areas of landscaping, and then the existing standards for all other properties, which people must maintain. So what we're asking you to do is to review the changes to the landscape chapter, where we are referencing this the state ordinance. And it's quite a lengthy state ordinance, and so we didn't incorporate it directly into the zoning code, but we just incorporate it by reference. And that also allows us to keep up with it if it is ever amended at the state level. That concludes my report.
Very good. That was less than 7 minutes, Mr. Foy. Any questions for Mr. Foy?
Not from me.
Okay, are we ready to take action on this one? Landrigan, go ahead, please.
Yes. I move that the Planning Commission recommend that the City Council adopt the proposed ordinance to amend Title 30 of the Glendale Municipal Code, Zoning Code Amendment Case Number PZC 1525985, relating to changing the landscaping requirements in the zoning code for projects subject to the Model Water Efficient Landscape Ordinance.
Is there a second?
Second.
Roll call, please.
Planning Commissioners Landrigan.
Aye.
Lee.
Aye.
Manukian.
Aye.
Chairperson Astorian.
Yes. Thank you. And so next item on the agenda is Community Development Department updates.
No, we don't have any.
None? Okay, very good. So comments from commissioners. I see we were all commented out, so we'll call for an adjournment. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman.
Yep.